districts received the same amount to 30 millions, in subsequent years it kept dwindling as the number of districts and the population of persons with disabilities increased. With support from the Together for Inclusion program, National Union for Disabled Persons of Uganda, an umbrella organization of persons with disabilities in Uganda, in collaboration with the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, will be holding a talk show on Tuesday 1st June from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. to raise awareness on the performance of the special grant for persons with disabilities from 2009-2010 to date, the challenges experienced therein, and the recommendations to improving the impact of this grant on the lives of persons with disabilities. The panelists are Esther Chozira, Chief Executive Officer, National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, and Emily Ajambo, AG Commissioner, Disability and Elderly, Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development.
Well, hello there and many thanks for staying with us on NTV Uganda. I'm Romeo Busiku. Land in Uganda is held under 4 tenure systems, including Milo, freehold, leasehold and customary land tenure. Approximately 70% of land in Uganda is under customary land tenure and is largely unregistered. In fact, only 18% of land in Uganda is registered. Women in Uganda are the primary users of land, producing more than 80% of the food, but only owning 1% of the land. Can you imagine? Women's insecurity of tenure increases their vulnerability. Number one, it ties women in the vicious cycle of poverty. It entrenches gender inequality and affects their productivity and increased food insecurity. And what about the youth? Yes, youth in Uganda face a major challenge of unemployment, with about 400,000 young people competing for how many jobs when they leave university? 9,000 jobs available. So the biggest bet is the agricultural sector, which has the potential to combat these challenges and employs approximately 58.4% of the youth, with 11 million vacancies. But then low access to the land is a major factor hindering young people from engaging in agriculture. So how best can we strengthen tenure security for both the women and the youth on customary land in Uganda? That's the $64,000 question that is going to be dissected by my three guests, including Ms. Frances Birungi. She is the Executive Director of the Uganda Community-Based Organization, that is the Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. We shall also have Ms. Eunice Nabakwa, a Principal Lands Officer from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. And on Zoom, we have Simon Peter Mwesije. He is a land tenure advisor with the Global Land Tool Network and UN Habitat. Well, very good morning, Frances Birungi and Ms. Eunice Nabakwa.
Thank you.
All right, let me kick off this conversation with someone, a representative from government, Ms. Eunice Nabakwa. We would like to know, women are producing 80% of our food in this country, but are owning only 1% of land in this country. Why is this happening?
Good morning, viewers. I am happy to be here discussing issues of women, land rights. Yes, women basically own the least percentage of land in Uganda because of the different ways how people acquire land in Uganda. First of all, you have land acquired through gifts, you have land acquired through inheritance, you have land acquired through purchase, and some other people get leases and they are able to utilize this land. But when you look at the women and their capacities to actually acquire land in one of those ways, which, for example, purchase is one of the biggest ways how women acquire land. Women do not have enough resources to actually purchase this land. So what remains is the inheritance bit of it, and that remains under the 80% of land in Uganda, which is not really documented for now. A small percentage of this land is only documented. So I think once we get this land documented, we shall be able to know how many women actually own land in Uganda and how do they utilize this land. Yes, I think, yeah.
So we also do know, according to the Global Land Tool Network, where Simon Peter Mwesige works at, they contend that we have very, very great land laws, but then the problem is that the implementation is wanting. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, the land laws are really good because we have the Constitution, we have the Land Act, we have the Registration of Titles Act, we have even policies, we have regulations, we have guidelines. We really have a good package of laws. But when it comes to the implementation, we have to look at the different stakeholders that really participate in this implementation. For example, I will talk about the land management institutions in the country. You have the area land committees who are at the grassroots. The area land committees actually are the basis of land registration. They do a lot of work when it comes to land registration. But the law partly has an issue when it comes to the capacities and qualifications of these area land committees who actually perform technical responsibilities. You realize that we only look at the age. You must be 30 years and above. We look at how long have you stayed in this area. Do you really understand the landowners in this place? But when it comes to the laws, they are first of all in English. Somebody who has not gone to school cannot read and write, maybe will not be able to guide the communities as to how they can go through this process. So we need to do a lot of capacity building for these people. Then from there you come to the districts. The districts, yes, they provide for the office of the land office, which should have the technical officers. But then you realize that most of the districts where we have been, I think Ukoba can testify, the capacity gap is really overwhelming. You find that you have only one technical officer who might not be able to guide properly the district land boards. Then you come to the office of the recorder, who's in charge of documenting customary land rights. The recorder is actually the sub-county chief, the senior assistant secretary, the SAS, yes. So they are overwhelmed with a lot of work. Now there is need to actually look into this law, because the law has been in place for over 20 years. And the implementation had never begun until 2016 when we actually went to Kasese, and that's where the whole process started. So we are walking a journey. We are trying to see what works and what does not work. But I'm happy to inform you that actually we realize that a lot works, but we need to work upon some of these loopholes, the gaps. And at the ministry, we are in the process of actually reviewing the Land Act. The process already began, and through our practical experiences, things we would not have known if we hadn't started the process. We would not have actually revised the law to come up with a better law that can really strengthen and support this process.
Great insight by Eunice Nabakwa. She is a principal land officer at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. Let's talk to some of our partners. We have Simon Peter Mwesige. He is a land tenure advisor with Global Land Tool Network, UN Habitat. A very good morning, Simon Peter Mwesige. Give us an overview of what kind of work you're engaged in as the Global Land Tool Network and UN Habitat right here in Uganda, so that the viewer could be able to understand where you're coming from.
Good afternoon, viewers. I want to greet all the viewers of NTV Uganda and the panelists and all who are joining the discussion through Zoom. I would like to thank our partners, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children Welfare, the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, and the management of NTV for organizing this important discussion. Before I answer the question that you have asked, let me highlight that good land and natural resource governance is really important for achieving social and economic transformation. Women land rights have been recognized as essential for achieving sustainable development goals in particular Goal 1, 2, and 5
Yes.
on eradicating poverty, ending hunger, and gender equality. On the African continent, the African Union has set a 30% target for women access to secure land rights by 2025. And in Uganda, a significant proportion of people, they still access land through customary land tenure systems with land rights which are still undocumented and out of formal land administration system. Women are most affected by tenure insecurity. We see an increasing number of land conflicts and land fragmentation. Registration of customary land rights and improving its administration is therefore extremely crucial to address some of the issues that affect women and youth in terms of secure access to land and natural resources. So access to secure land, right, is a challenge that many youth in Uganda, they face. So land and natural resource continue to be essential to start a business, produce food, and to generate income. However, many youth face obstacles in getting access to land. The challenges of youth in land governance relate to how society and families perceive them. They have, in many cases, limited access to information.
Right.
They have limited participation in decision making. We also see that youth face the challenge of inadequate capacity to participate in land governance. And as Eunice mentioned, many young people are prohibited from participating in some of the land governance forums,
Yes.
like the area land committee, the district land board, and so on, because of the limitation on age. We also see that some youth have a challenge related to exclusion from existing land policies. For instance, the national land policy does not mention how youth are a key stakeholder in land governance and how the land policy intends to engage them to participate in land governance.
Simon,
so these are some of the challenges that we have.
Simon, we would like to know what kind of gap does the Global Land Tool Network and UN Habitat seek to bridge when you enter this partnership with our government and also other civil society organizations, just like the Uganda Community-Based Association for Children and Women's Welfare?
Yes, so thank you for the question. So having highlighted those challenges, the Global Land Tool Network, as facilitated by UN Habitat in partnership with government and other stakeholders in Uganda, is supporting intervention to support customary land rights through gender-sensitive issuance of certificates of customary ownership in different parts of Uganda, in Imbale, Butaleja, Kabale, Kisoro, Pader, and Adjumani districts. Women and youth land rights are given special attention in these processes. The aim is to not only ensure the outcomes, such as certificates issued, are inclusive, but also the processes target to transform social norms and empower women and girls. The project build capacity and interest of young people in land administration, such as the projects build capacity of youth to lead implementation of project activities such as mapping, data collection, awareness raising, and in dispute resolution to record minutes, and the youth are co-opted as part of the mediation committees. The involvement of young people in data collection using fit-for-purpose tools such as use of tablets, GPS receivers, and so on, is also another intervention that is done. And this is really very important to ensure that young people participate in land administration and that they their capacity is built to participate in land governance.
And of course, our universities are churning out 400,000 fresh graduates every year who are competing for only 9,000 jobs that are available. It seems like agriculture is the biggest bet to alleviate this issue of unemployment with over 11 million vacancies, Mr. Simon.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
It seems like our universities are churning out over 400,000 fresh graduates who are competing for only 9,000 jobs. And according to experts, our biggest bet of alleviating unemployment is agriculture, which is offering 11 million vacancies or employing over 58.4% of our youth. But then the biggest challenge is that these youth do not have access to this land.
That's correct. We observe in the projects that we are implementing in different parts of the country that young people lack access to land and natural resources in order to tap into the opportunities that these present. And so this is really a big challenge. And as I mentioned, this is mostly because young people are viewed, especially a certain age of young people, are viewed as not so responsible. So the elders in the community don't want to trust them with land and natural resources. There is also a perception that young people, when trusted land resources, they will sell these resources and run for initiatives that give them income very fast, like border businesses and other urban-based enterprises. So this is really a big challenge, and it's one of the issues that we are tackling by trying to empower young people and to interest them in land governance.
All right, thank you very much, Simon Peter Mwesije. He is a land tenure advisor with the UN Habitat and Global Land 2 Network. Well, we also do have someone from the Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. That's none other than Ms. Birungi Francis. She is the executive director, and she's been interacting with these young men and women who are actually grappling with low access to land, low tenure security on customary land. Francis Birungi, what are some of these challenges women and youth face in exercising their land rights on customary land?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That's a very good question.
Indeed.
Like the previous speakers have mentioned, the major challenge that women and youth face is really around being discriminated against their ability to be able to access land, but also to own land.
Indeed.
So we find that that has been the major challenge, the major cause of all the surface problems that we see, where they are not able to participate in decision-making processes and so forth. All these are surface problems. But the real challenge really that faces women and youth is really that discrimination. And this discrimination mainly stems from our social norms. So the existing norms and traditions, or I would call them the customary, ways of life in our communities, tend to discriminate women and youth, especially in terms of access and ownership of resources like land. So we see, for example, when we look at customary land, for example, but also other land tenure systems, when you look at the major ways in which land is accessed, Eunice mentioned, it's mainly through inheritance, through either a gift or through purchase. But the major, amongst the three, the main form of accessing land, of being able to acquire land, is inheritance, cutting across all the tenure systems. But when you look at our customs, our norms and practices at community level, but also cutting across, we see that land as a natural resource is mainly passed on through the male lineage. So, from father to son, and that in a way leaves out women as primary owners of land, because that is how our system is. Land has been entrusted to the men and the boys. So the women at that level are excluded from ownership and access. And this is even the same for girls who are youth. They are excluded from that point. And the boys also are excluded at that point because of age. Because our norms do not, like Simon Peter mentioned, they do not in many times land is not allocated to boys because of some of these fears. For example, that the youth are fast, are quick, they want quick money, so
they will sell off the land and so forth.
So if they will sell off the land if they are entrusted with the land. So many times we see that our practices, our norms exclude women and youth. So that has really been the major challenge. And because of that, we find that because of this exclusion, women and youth have not been able to fully exercise their land rights. And this, of course, as you said, challenges them in terms of their ability to sustain their livelihoods, their ability to access a number of resources in the community, because land is the key productive resource that we have as a country. So if we are excluded from this as a major productive resource, then you're tied in the vicious circle of poverty, because you cannot be able to have sustainable livelihoods that can pull you out of poverty. But beyond that, as the root cause of the problem that women and youth face in terms of access to land, we also face a number of challenges. We find a number of challenges at community level for some of us that work at community level. For example, access to information is really a problem that women and youth face. And this again can be linked to the norms and the customs that we have in the community. For example, we find that many women are isolated in their homes, and many times they're very busy doing their other productive roles and are not able to engage or to, to go for meetings, to go for dialogues, to go to get this information that would empower them to be able to claim their rights, but also to assert their rights. So this has really been a problem also for the youth. We find, for example, that majority of youth access information through telephones, for example, social media, for example. But many youth, for example, in communities that we work with, are not able to access information on land from these mediums of communication, because probably the way in which the land actors are passing on this information is not appropriate for that, for women. It could even be the time. For example, for women, if you're putting a show at lunchtime, like we have done, how many women have you excluded? Because at this time we are preparing food, we are looking after our children, and so there are some of those things that really exclude women. Information is power. If women and youth have information, they can be able to claim, they can be able to assert their rights on land. So that is also a major challenge that we have. But the main form of information that women and youth need is information in regard to the laws that exist. And the institutions that exist to be able to support them in terms in case these rights are being violated. But many times, many youth and women don't know about these laws. They don't know that they have rights as human beings. They don't know that they have rights to land. They do not know that there are laws, that the ones that were mentioned by Eunice, that the Constitution that protects them, the Land Act. So without this, without knowing that there are laws in place, very gender-responsive laws, very inclusive laws, it's very difficult for women to assert and claim their rights. So those are a number of challenges that I see, and also maybe finally I can mention the issue of tenure security. Because of the challenges that women and youth have, they really lack security of tenure. They don't feel safe on the land that they are on, because there is nothing that confirms that they have rights on that land. There is no documentation, for example, that their rights have not been registered on this land. So because of that, they do not have that feeling of safety. There is no feeling of safety on that land. And many of them, many times we see that the challenges that they face are land grabbing. Their land is taken away from them easily. They are, for women, there's disinheritance when the spouse passes on, or when the relationship that they have with the primary owner of land ends. We see that many women are disinherited or chased away from the land that they are on. There is eviction that we see, and we see that eviction is not a homogeneous. It does not affect men and women equally. It affects men, women, and youth differently. Women and youth tend to have more adverse effects when it comes to eviction. So all these challenges are because women and youth do not have security of tenure. There is nothing that confirms that they have rights over this piece of land that they have. There is no documentation. There are no certificates of ownership. So that really makes them very vulnerable. And when there is an investor that comes and is interested in this land, there is nothing that they have that they can, you know, show to say that we are the owners of this land.
Indeed.
So this really makes them very vulnerable, and we see most of them losing their land.
You know, Francis Birungi, there is someone who is watching this show and wondering, okay, maybe it's just the women who are grappling with this major challenge, but it's not only the women, it's the entire country. We are talking about women producing 80% of the food, but owning 1% of the land. This shall compound on the issue of food insecurity. If they do not have land, how will they till the land to actually offer food to this country? So expand more on that issue of food insecurity.
Yes, that is very true. You know, it's really sad to know that women spend so much time on land resources that they do not own. You know, as a woman, as a human being, it's just dehumanizing to know that you're tilling and toiling on something that you do not own, that any time you're going to lose your ability to use that land. So that is a challenge that that we have, and it really affects productivity in the sense that if women or even youth who are really energetic and are spending a lot of time on this land, if they do not have that sense of security, if there is nothing that confirms that they will not lose this land at any one time, you know, that makes it very difficult for them to invest their time, to invest their energy, to invest in technologies, to invest in, you know, in ways that can improve or can boost their productivity on this land, or can boost the productivity of this land. So we see that if we do not invest so much in strengthening security of tenure for women and youth, then we lose out as a country. We lose out on not only in terms of food security at household level, but in terms of production in agriculture. And we know for sure that agriculture is a very big contributor to our GDP.
21%.
21%, that is huge. And therefore, if women's security of tenure is not guaranteed, if youth do not feel that they have rights on this land and they can invest more on this land, then it affects the economy as well. So I think it's very critical that we invest a lot, we organize a lot in terms of supporting women to be able to have secure access to land, but also to be able to own, to have that ownership of land, so that then they can invest more, boost their productivity, and then we shall have the issues of food security minimized at household level, but also our GDP as a country will be boosted, because the productivity, both for sustenance, but also for import and export and trade, will be boosted. So that really supports the country as
Indeed.
a whole.
Now that the country is trying to make that shift from subsistence agriculture all the way to commercialized agriculture, access to land is going to be a major factor in actually expounding more on how many people are going to be engaging in this practice of agriculture. If women have low access to land, it means they'll not be engaging in agriculture. If youth do not have access to land, it means they will not be engaging in agriculture all the same. Meaning the youth will continue to grapple with unemployment, and the women will continue being in that vicious cycle of poverty. So strengthening tenure security for women and youth on customary land is the way to go. We shall take a breather and then return shortly with Eunice Nabakwa explaining to us why it is important to register customary land rights. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, and many thanks for staying with us on NTV Uganda. We are perusing through the recommendations and taking a look at how best we can strengthen tenure security for women and youth on customary land. I still have Miss Eunice Nabakwa. She is the Principal Lands Officer from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. We also do have Francis Birungi. She is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. And on Zoom, Simon Peter Mwesije is a Land Tenure Advisor, UN Habitat and Global Land Tool Network. Those are the partners that are sponsoring this particular show. How best can we strengthen tenure security for women and youth on customary land? That's the $64,000 question. Eunice Nabakwa, we are back. Tell us the significance of registering customary land rights in Uganda. Why is it important?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think we really need to discuss this in detail.
Indeed.
So as I mentioned earlier, the law has been in place for over 20 years, but there were no efforts to implement this law. Maybe because people were still very comfortable on their customary land in the villages where we come from. We've been to so many districts. We've been to Kasese, Nwoya, Pade, Butaleja, Mbale. We've gone to Ajumani, Nebi, Bulisa. We are in Namutumba. We are in so many districts. Now, government left it upon the people. This process is actually voluntary. It is demand driven. So if the people do not want to register their land, well and good. Maybe they still feel like their tenure security is still guaranteed. But in Kasese, because 67% of land in Kasese is owned by government, and the people remain with only 33%. So there was this issue of security of tenure, and they had to demand for this process to begin. So that's where we began from. Now, I've mentioned we have the Constitution, we have the Land Act, we have the regulations that clearly provide for the procedures for registering customary land. So, in the Constitution, it is known that land belongs to the people. So when you come to the Land Act, the Constitution says Parliament shall enact laws to implement or operationalize the provisions of the Constitution. So the Land Act was enacted in 1998, and it provides in detail the processes that have to be taken to register customary land. Now, first of all, the whole process begins with the sensitization of the communities, and our partners have really done well in that, in supporting the ministry to do that. You sensitize the communities, and then the communities are taken through the procedures on how to register this land. Then the communities make applications. The area land committees put up notices. So these notices are very important. It's a 14-day notice, very important for the community to know that so and so in this village wants to register their land. So if there are any disputes, any claims against that land, someone should be able to put in their complaints to the area land committees. And I mentioned that these area land committees are very critical. They handle very technical issues. So they must be empowered and their capacities must be built.
Which is not being done.
We are doing it. As I've told you, we started it from Kasese, and now we are in the process of rolling out. We are building capacities through technical trainings, and the partners have also come on board to incorporate issues of dispute resolution. Right. So we are trying really to build the capacities. But as I told you, the law is being revised to also look at the qualifications of these members. They need to be at least elevated to be able to read and write. The forms I told you, the laws are all in English, and we also need to interpret these laws. The Constitution talks about interpretation of laws. So if we are, for example, in Nwoya, and people do not understand English, how will they be able to follow the forms and read the laws in order to actually register the land? So once the notice has been put up, then on the 14th day, the area land committee moves to the ground, and they are supposed to hold a hearing in front of neighbors, in front of the applicants, and any other witnesses that might be available. So this is a transparent process that is meant to actually ensure that the rightful owners of this land actually are the ones who are registered. And so during that time, that's when the rights of the youth and women must be emphasized. So if you actually refuse to register the youth and the women, and the land is customarily owned, then we shall not go ahead to register your land. Yes, it is a policy. So once the issues have been clarified, the inspection report is written. It must be a detailed inspection report. The data is captured, and the methods of capturing this data, it is no longer the other method of just planting boundary markers. No. The partners have come on board, and they've come up with advanced tools of capturing this data. So we use GPSs, we pick coordinates, and all this is ensured, is meant to ensure that the boundaries are properly marked. Once that is done, the application is sent to the district land board. Now, the District Land Board, their role, their mandate as per the Constitution and as per the Land Act is to facilitate land registration. And I emphasize facilitation. I do not mean that the District Land Boards own. Some District Land Boards, they want to own the land. You actually go there and they're like, we shall not register, and you're wondering why. The Constitution is very clear. Land belongs to the people of Uganda.
Okay, here's the case, Eunice Nabakwa. The Constitution of 95 is clear. The Land Act of 98 is also clear. Yes. The Land Policy of 2013 is also clear. But then women have continued to be discriminated based on structural societal norms. Why?
The structure, the customary norms and traditions, you know, it is something that cannot be done away with in just a minute.
Even laws cannot do that.
The laws are there. Of course, when you are discriminated against, like for example, I've told you that for us, we do not register any land where women and youth have been discriminated against, because the Constitution is so clear that anything that contravenes the Constitution is null and void. So, but going back to the fact that most of the land under customary tenure is not yet registered. Now we are beginning to do the registration. And wherever we have been, I think the partners can testify. Majority of women's rights have been documented on customary land. Yet the norm has always been that customs and traditions discriminate against women. So there is need to do sensitization, talk to these women actually.
The first piece of sensitization we should start with, Eunice Nabakwa, is by actually allaying some of the fears that might come about if you do not register your customary land. So what are some of those challenges that will come about if I do not, me as Romeo Busiku, register my customary land? Let's give them reasons to run right now and register their land.
Okay, then now the first reason why you should register your customary land is that once you have registered your customary land, you have legal documentation. And this, as per Section 8 of the Land Act, it is conclusive proof of ownership of land. So in case you have a court case or anybody has encroached on your land, you have the documentation and the other person doesn't have the documentation. The second point is that we have been used to the freeholds. The freeholds, most people know about the freeholds. So some innocent people sit back in their villages, and then the fraudsters, if I should call them all, the land grabbers, they go forge documents and get freeholds on top of their customary land. Now, once you have a certificate of customary ownership, like it happened in Kasese, once you have a certificate of customary ownership, anybody who comes with a freehold does not take any precedence. So Section 59 of the Registration of Titles Act becomes irrelevant at that point. The second thing is that once you register your customary land, they've been talking about the youth who run to sell off their land. Now, once you have a certificate of customary ownership, you will be able to lease out this land. Most people, for example, in Moyo, we have been in Moyo, and you realize that Sudanese come and they buy land. But these residents of Moyo do not know that actually you cannot sell off your customary land rights. So because they have no documentation, they just sell off all their land. These people from Sudan go to the land boards, and the land boards are like, you are a non-Ugandan, you cannot acquire a certificate of customary ownership. So what we shall do is give you a leasehold. So in this circumstance, the land board assumes the responsibility of a lessor, yet the land is not for the land board. So once the land rights have been registered, people will be able to lease out their land.
Amazing insights from Eunice Nabakwa, a Principal Lands Officer from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. We have via Zoom Simon Peter Mwesije is a land tenure advisor with UN Habitat and the Global Land 2 Network. A very good afternoon once again, Simon Peter Mwesije. Would like to know what are some of those major challenges that have persistently come about when it comes to documentation and registration of customary land.
Can you please repeat the question?
The challenges that exist when it comes to registration and documentation of customary land rights.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. As already mentioned, the law has been in place for quite a while. The Land Act has been in place for more than 20 years. And the National Land Policy since 2013. So it's not the lack of enabling legal and policy framework. In fact, the main challenge is, as also alluded to by the previous speaker, is the capacities at the land management institutions that are supposed to implement. So there is a lot of interest, as we have understood, from the public to register their land. However, if you want to register your land, then you have to do it through a sporadic process. Sporadic means it's demand driven. And so it's not, the entire process is not facilitated by government. And as a result, what we see is that that process is very costly. It's also time, it takes a long time to get your documents. And so it's because of that that many people have not been registering their land. Back to the issue of capacity, the area land committee, the district land board, and the recorder at the sub-county are the key officers for registering customary land. However, in many cases, these institutions are not facilitated. So if you want to register your land, you have to facilitate these institutions. And that is also, as I mentioned earlier, very costly. But also, many of these institutions have no knowledge of the enabling instruments and process to register customary land, except in those areas that I mentioned earlier, where there have been projects like the ones we support to support registration of customary land. So in the other areas, and these are not many, these are very few areas. So the majority of in the majority of the areas in the country, you actually have land management institutions that are not even facilitated or not even conversant with the process for registering customary land. But they are, let me be clear, they are very conversant with the conventional registration processes. And here I'm talking about
the traditional processes,
leasehold and Milo land, because that is what they have been doing before. And for customary land, they are not conversant. The other key issue here that I think is systematic and we need to address as a land sector, I think it is the funding of government that is going in the land sector.
Right.
As you might be aware, the land sector gets a very small budget that is only enough to pay salaries of the staff. So they are left with very little to actually do the rest of the work, especially in the communities. And I think that this is a very big challenge. It's even glaring at the local government level, so the district and the sub-county. And so I think that if we are to solve the land challenges that we are talking about, the government has got to prioritize, has got first of all to recognize that the other sectors are not going to take off if the land issues are not solved, and then also to make the necessary investment into the land sector in order for these issues to be addressed. So the land will provide infrastructure for the other sectors to actually take off.
Well, thank you very much, Simon Peter Mjenyi. He's a land tenure advisor with UN Habitat. Francis Birungi, let's talk about the approaches or strategies that have been adopted in the certificate of customary ownership process when it comes to securing the tenure for women and youth on customary land.
Thank you.
What are some of those strategies?
Yes, for us as UCOBAC, supported by UN Habitat and GLTN and also the Ministry of Lands, our major business is basically to make sure that the land registration processes benefit women and youth. so that we do not have the same challenge that we have had with the traditional land registration processes that Simon was alluding to, whereby, for example, in the registration under freehold, it's not been very intentional to make sure that women and youth are able to participate and also benefit from the land registration process.
Indeed.
So what we are doing on customary land registration, specifically in the provision of certificates of customary ownership, is to make sure that we are very intentional in the sense that we put in place strategies and approaches that will increase the participation and the benefit of women and youth in the land registration process. And some of the things that we do in engendering the land registration process on customary land is, for example, working with the land actors at local level, building their capacity, especially in the area of gender responsive land administration, so that when they are providing land services, including land registration services, they are coming from a gender sensitive point of view, where they are not looking at men and women as different beings, but as equal beings that have equal rights on land.
Yes.
So we are doing a lot of sensitization, bringing together the area land committees, the physical planners, the district land offices, and so forth, to really strengthen their capacity in terms of how they can do the CCO registration process from a gender sensitive point of view, from a gender responsive point of view, so that women and youth can be able to be included in all these processes. Like Eunice mentioned, in these processes that we have had in this provision of certificates of customary ownership, we've had so many women and youth being registered, their land rights being registered. Actually, if you look at the statistics, there are more women and youth that are being registered on customary land with the CCOs. Because it really is a system that provides for there are different options. You can either do it individually, but mainly on customary land, it's either as a household, as a family, or in a clan. So that provides an opportunity for women and youth to be included in this certificate of customary ownership. Also, another approach that we've taken that is very critical is adoption of some tools and approaches that are fit for purpose, that are gender responsive, that are affordable and accessible for many women and youth, because majority of women and youth cannot afford the traditional land registration processes. For example, you bring a surveyor, it just excludes them at that point because of the costs. So adapting some of these tools, and there are a number of tools that are in place. GL10 and UN Habitat have really developed very accessible, affordable, fit for purpose tools, and luckily enough, Ministry of Lands is very open to these tools. It's really adapting the use of these tools as ways in which we can increase the ability of women and youth to be part of this process. Because then, if it's a GPS, if it is a tablet, then the costs go low. It will not cost so much. For example, in Pader and where we are working, and in other districts that were mentioned by Eunice, I think a household will at most spend 10,000 shillings. Even if we see that that 10,000 is usually a problem for many families, it is much better than the 2 million that the surveyor, for example, would ask for. So we are trying as much as possible to adapt and promote the use of some of these tools and approaches that are more accessible, like the social tenure domain model is one tool that I can mention that we are applying at community level. Another strategy that we have taken is awareness raising. And awareness raising is basically to overcome the challenge that I mentioned, where many women and youth have been excluded from land processes and are not aware of the existing laws and policies that are there to protect their rights. So doing a lot of community mobilization and sensitization, awareness raising on the existing laws and policies, on the processes that Eunice was mentioning. How does one acquire a certificate of customary ownership? So we work with people like from the ministry to go down to the communities and really translate these technical laws and policies to their level in the local language, illustrating to them how, for example, one can be able to access a certificate of customary ownership. So we do a lot of awareness raising, knowledge building, and supporting communities to understand what their rights are, so that then they can be able to claim and assert these rights at community
Francis
level.
Birungi is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. At 12:50, we have 5 minutes left to end this show. It would be right to get the perspective of the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development before we close this conversation. What are some of those challenges as government that you've identified that are hindering this process of registration and documentation of customary land? I mean, we are talking about 70% of the land in Uganda being held under the customary land tenure. Only 18% of this land is titled. Why is it a slow process, and why are few people embracing it? What are those challenges? Talk to us.
Yes, the first one, as Simon has mentioned, is to do with resources, financial resources. Government actually collects a lot in taxes, but what is plowed back is less. So
priorities, not
yes,
really that there is no money, but government just has to work on its priorities.
Yes. The second one is the misinformation. Actually, I have to talk about this misinformation. The communities have been misinformed because of the different different interests, let me say that. So some people do not get the right information. So by the time you go there, their minds have already been corrupted, misinformed, and so that's another challenge. The other challenge is to do with the staffing, the technical staffs at the different institutions. As I mentioned, the district land office has to really be staffed, properly staffed, so that they can provide the necessary capacities for this process to go on. I think for now, those are the only challenges I can look at. Yes, but moving forward, I should say that we are doing well. We are doing well in terms of registering customary land, and I can assure Ugandans that the process is transparent and it ensures security of tenure of customary land owners. Let's all embrace it and then be able to acquire legal documentation on our customary land, so that we can avoid all these issues of land grabbing, land evictions, and all those kinds of things.
Eunice Nabakwa is a Principal Lands Officer in the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. Simon Peter Mwesije is a partner with us. This show is sponsored by UN Habitat, a global land tool network. We would like to get to know your recommendations on how best we can scale up registration and documentation of customary land. Under 1 minute. Simon, recommendations.
Thank you very much. My key recommendation is for the government to look at the lessons learned and experiences from these different pilots that are being implemented, using fit for purpose and gender responsive approaches to register customary land, and develop a national program that is also gender responsive and takes into consideration interests of young people, and then implement it at a national scale so that everybody in the country can benefit.
Well, thank you very much, Simon Peter Mwesije, a land tenure advisor with UN Habitat and Global Land Tool Network. Also, we did have Eunice Nabakwa, a Principal Lands Officer with the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. And lastly, we did have Miss Francis Birungi. She is the Executive Director, Uganda Community-Based Association for Women and Children's Welfare. The conversation was largely centered around strengthening tenure security for women and youth on customary land in Uganda. When you empower women and their access to land, food security, yes, will be one of those issues that shall be addressed. When you empower young men to actually get engaged in agriculture, unemployment will be done away with. So it's all about access to land. This is the biggest resource that we need to do away with most of the challenges we are grappling with in Uganda, especially unemployment and also food insecurity. Issues to do with gender equality, gender equity will all be addressed if access to land is actually in a uniform manner. My name is Romy Busiku. That's it for this conversation. Await NTV at 1, coming to you shortly.